As the Denver Mayoral runoff race heats up, Michael Hancock and Jamie Gillis held competing endorsement rallies this week. Those rallies came right before they headed to this very studio for the first debate of the runoff season, one you'll be able to catch next Friday at 9 p.m. Meanwhile, the Gillis campaign spent the latter half of the week addressing a social media scrubbing based on past tweets about Chinatowns, Cinco de Mayo, and a video about the NAACP. Patty, I guess Charles Dickens be coming to write the story of this week for Jamie Gillis. It definitely was a tale of two halves of the week. Tuesday, as we talked around the table before we started taping, she's riding some pretty high momentum after the Unity rally with Penfield Tate and Lisa Calderon coming to endorse her. And a little over 24 hours later, she's scrubbing social media accounts and getting video played of her incorrectly naming what the NAACP stands for. What do you make of the week for both the Gillis and Hancock campaigns?
That it is just the start of a very wild ride. I sat here last week and was talking about a team of rivals because I'd just been reading Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, and so that kind of set the script maybe for up till Tuesday. And it was a really impressive, I thought, rally when you saw Penn Tate and Lisa Calderon and their supporters standing behind Jamie Gillis in the heat at the City and County building half an hour after Hancock had been standing across the street in Civic Center Park with Wellington Webb and John Hickenlooper and reading a letter from Bill Vidal, so three of the former mayors supporting him. It was really a drastic contrast, but I could not have predicted that within 24 hours I would learn that NAACP stands for Nitwitted Ammo, Answers Critics' Prayers. I mean, she just really gave Hancock something to run with right then. And we've all slipped up when we've said things. I'm going to do it about 5 more times while I sit at this table. I think her recovery that day wasn't horrible, but it is just very, very hard when everybody is punching you in social media, and it has been ugly in social media. It was ugly as soon as the runoff was as soon as the count was concluded, and we're going to see more of it. Yes, she scrubbed her social media. Most people would do it before they ran. Some of Hancock's employees have done it before they've taken jobs in the city, and one who didn't before she took a job in the sheriff's department lost her job because of things she'd put on social media. So in this day and age, you know you have to be careful about what you've said anytime, but what I would hope really matters is what's said now. What are people talking about with policies? We should be debating what's going to be the best direction for Denver. What's going to go on with the homeless? What's going on with development? We have so many issues we need to talk about. Race is one of them, but I know we watched 4 of the last 5 mayors since 1983, sorry. They've been people of color, and that's great. We're a very progressive city. We haven't seen one woman there. That doesn't mean you only vote by gender or race, but that's part of the discussion too.
David, part of me thinks that there's a little bit of kind of glass houses here because I think if the average voter had the opportunity to be sprung on to political trivia night, what does the NAACP stand for and things like that, not all of them come out the perfect score. But in situations like this, you're running for mayor, no one twists your arm to do it, and how you respond to issues like this, especially when you're trying to ride some momentum early in the week, becomes an issue, becomes part of the issue as well. What do you think?
I think it's a reflection of the stupidity of our times that so much about politics and about personal destruction in general, whether Australian rugby players or anybody else in the public eye, is these nasty busybodies who have to troll through somebody's tweets and Facebook and find something that could be cast as politically incorrect, they said 10 or 15 years ago. That's a degradation of civil discourse. In the more serious vein, the challenge she faces is the history of Denver mayoral races. Is you have a number of times when the incumbent doesn't get to 50%. So you'd say, well, over half the people don't like the incumbent, so number 2 ought to have a good chance. But that didn't happen with McNichols versus Tooley in 75 or in 71, where the challenger got the incumbent into a runoff, but then the incumbent won. And then in 1995, Wellington Webb, at the end of his first term, there were a lot of concerns about lack of competence and cronyism, similar to the current mayor. And a fairly new city councilwoman, Mary DeGroot, who Westward had previously named as freshman city council person of the year or something like that, ran a very strong campaign and put him in the runoff. But he was then able to turn it around, and I know even some of the people who voted for DeGroote the first time, he cast enough doubt on her that they came back and voted for him, and Webb won that runoff.
Eric, we talked about this last week. You have been in the midst of this battle. You know how hard it is to defeat a mayoral incumbent in Denver. You need momentum. You need a lot of things going your way. And it seemed that Gillis may have had some of that, and they may have lost some of that. If you take the week in total and what it can turn into, where does your instincts fall of the position her campaign is in right now in taking an incumbent that a week ago we were not describing in a strong position?
So much to cover here, and let me try to do it somewhat quickly. I try to divide the issue really into two. One, what's the political analysis? What are the political ramifications of this week? And then, where should it be? And if you can get past the politics, where should it be? Politically, I guess I differ with Patty a little bit. Patty says this is just an opening act in a long, wild ride. This ride is going by very, very quickly. Ballots are going out 72 hours from now as we tape the show. The runoff next Tuesday will be halfway over. 2 out of 4 weeks will be gone. This runoff, as we talked a couple weeks ago, I think was much more about Jamie Gillis than was about Michael Hancock. The city knows Michael Hancock. They know what strengths he has. They know what warts he has. Clearly, the city was expressing at least an openness to change back on May, whatever that date was, May 7th, by 62% of wanting anybody but, or at least someone else. But Jamie Gillis was an unknown. And early, what do they say about first impressions or early? This isn't a first impression, but it is an early impression, and it is a tough one to combat politically. The Hancock people, obviously, they had gone through and done the opposition research on her tweets, etc. And I lived through some of this back in 1995 in the Webb DeGroote campaign. They needed to boost their black turnout. They needed to boost minority enthusiasm. They wanted to turn this somewhat, not totally, but somewhat about race. They needed to make race a part of the discussion. And sadly, for Gillis's point of view, she gave it to him. She teed it up as a nice, very, very slow pitch and a juicy pitch. In terms of where the equities are in this, I don't know. It's going to be in the eye of the beholder for Gillis voters versus Hancock voters. We're going to find out really quickly how badly this city wants change, how potent this team of rivals, the Tate, Calderon, Gillis ticket, can be, and whether people are willing to give her a second chance or not. I don't know if they're willing to give her a second chance. I'll wait for later, but I have my own feelings about like the Chinatown tweet and whatever. I think that was just crap that they brought that up, and who knows what she was meaning at the time.
Well, Susan, let's piggyback on that, because we weren't talking about overtly outrageous racist tweets from 10 years ago when she was at a party somewhere. I mean, asking if there's Chinatowns, or why there are Chinatowns in some cities, is not overtly problematic, especially if it was 10 years ago. And then also not knowing what the NAACP stands for. Yes, that's a problem, but I don't think that if we're going to hold everybody to that account, there's a lot more other questions I guess I'd want to ask each candidate. What do you think is the overall effect of the different things we've seen come out this week, both that the Gillis campaign would consider positive with the Unity rally, and negative with the different cuts she has had from the social media scrubbing?
I think she's shaken. I think what you can see in these interviews, I was with her for a while yesterday, and I'll, after this taping, be going to another interview with her. She's shaken by this. She is a political newcomer. The whole rap about her having not voted, the sort of string of these things, I think, are shaking her, and there's a level of I kind of have to say it's a red letter day. I agree with Dave. There's a meanness to it that rattles her, and we saw that when she and Lisa Calderon, who's now on her team of rivals, when Lisa would sort of snipe at her, justifiably, and you would see Jamie be shaken. I don't agree with Eric about the Chinatown tweet. I think of all of these things, that's the most relevant, because the tweet said, and this is from 2009, so let's be clear, it was a decade ago, here's a question: why do so many cities feel it necessary to have a Chinatown? What Jamie Gillis brings to the table here is a tremendous amount of expertise in urban planning and in city landscapes. And this is what she's been doing for the past 15 years. This is her platform. She brought on this team of rivals not just because she needs their support politically, but she is willing to admit, look, I've not worked in the political arena. I've not worked in the civil rights or human services arena. I've worked in these landscapes. And so for someone who had, at that point, been working in these landscapes for 5 or 6 years, to ask a question, why do they feel it necessary? There's a suggestion there that it's somehow she doesn't understand why communities in cities, especially immigrant communities, do cluster. And for a person whose main platform is making these cities livable for people, keeping neighborhoods intact in terms of their cultural and historic identity, that to me, it goes right to her field. And we've seen her sort of make attempts to try to explain her way out of it. And I think what she's learning as a candidate, among many other things, because I think she is learning a lot about how cities work and how sensitive some of these more civil rights and human and racial issues are than her realm in city planning. I think what we're seeing is someone who is very publicly saying, I'm not perfect. And I think we need to contrast that with a mayor who actually really doesn't answer questions and is not available, and himself has a very questionable record on race. And I want to say, his main talking point in this re-election bid, his main argument for a third term is diversity and his race. And I think it is a distraction from his record on that. And I hope that people focus on that in the next 2 weeks.